Kwame Anthony Appiah, who teaches at Princeton, has achieved what amounts to rock star status among philosophers. In his latest book titled The Honor Code, he asks how moral revolutions happen. Appiah looks at three morally repugnant practices: dueling among British gentlemen, foot binding among the Chinese elite, and slavery in the British Empire, and asks why they persisted and how they ended. In each case, he said, a society's idea of honor sustained the practice for centuries, and a shift in what was considered honorable ended the practice within just a few decades. Moral revolutions weren't based on good arguments alone. It took peer pressure, the desire to be esteemed by one's peers. Dueling, for example, was the means by which British gentlemen defended their own honor and the honor of their families. When the practice was taken up by the lower classes, however, it was soon abandoned by the elites. In the same way, foot binding went out of favor as Chinese elites discovered, mainly through the testimony of Christian missionaries, that the barbaric practice had made them a laughingstock among foreign elites. Moral revolutions do not happen when honor goes out of fashion, but when the ground of honor shifts. Peer pressure continues to drive people to act, but in a different way. In Britain, Parliament passed laws against slavery when tradesmen and workers in England began to invoke the honor of working men as an argument against tolerating slave labor. Appiah is right. People respond to peer pressure and the need for approval from others. The problem is that honor in this sense is morally blind. It can dictate praiseworthy or blameworthy behavior. Many teenage boys experience prostitution for the first time because their friends egg them on, typically during a milestone birthday celebration. In other words, we are often driven more by convention than by conviction, more by what brings honor from without than by what expresses good character from within. People who live by the character code, however, do what is right, not necessarily what is popular. They do what they ought to do. The challenge, when trying to provoke a moral revolution, is for enough people to live by the character code to change the demands of the honor code. So here's the question. What would it take to forge an honor code that would protect women and girls from being abused by pornography and violated by rape? We have evidence that this approach could work. Men who rape underage girls say the one reason they would stop is to keep their families, friends, and coworkers from finding out. The truth, of course, is that we should all live in glass houses, morally speaking, with nothing to hide. Following the crowd is not good enough. We need to live by the character code. So I have a homework assignment to offer. First, watch Dan Rather's report on Portland, Oregon. You can find it on iTunes. I'll link to it in the online version of my sermon. Remember that the problem here in New York is worse by far. probably by a factor of 10 or more. Everything is bigger in New York, even the problems. Then read Marge Percy's poem titled Rape Poem. It includes this line: "There is no difference between being raped and going headfirst through a windshield, except that afterward you are afraid not of cars, but of half the human race." I'll append the poem to my sermon online. Also, if you are a man, go to whiteribbon.ca and sign a statement called the White Ribbon Pledge. Again, I'll link to whiteribbon.ca in the online version of my sermon. By signing the pledge, you declare the following: I will never commit, condone, or remain silent about violence against women and girls. Formally declaring our intent in these matters is a good idea. As you will notice, the White Ribbon Campaign is a Canada-based international organization that, as of yet, has no U.S. presence. I'm exploring whether it would make sense for us to start one. I'll let you know. The last part of the homework is the hardest. Ask a woman who trusts you if she would be willing to tell you how violence has affected her life. Then sit back and listen. Just listen. Remember the poem about the windshield. There's a 1 in 3 chance that she's been through it. Listen. And whether you are a man or a woman, if you are struggling with any of these matters, reach out for help. Talk with me or one of the other ministers here. We're here when you need us. High atop the cliff in the national sanctuary of our sorrowful mother stands an exquisite little meditation chapel. It's built like a diminutive movie theater with a screen of glass overlooking the city of Portland and the mountains beyond. From there, everything looks lovely and pure and whole. 82nd Avenue seems impossibly distant and unbearably close. It's both. Because you and I have sometimes seen beauty and felt wholeness, we know the truth about what's ugly and broken on 82nd Avenue. Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times has called for a new abolitionist movement to end sex slavery around the globe. You and I should be in the thick of this fray. After all, our Unitarian and Universalist forebears were at the vanguard of the move to end slavery in this nation. One of them was Theodore Parker, who said, famously, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends toward justice." The arc of the moral universe bends toward justice. This I believe, and this is why we can be saved. Imagine what we can do together. Amen. I love you. May God bless us all.